Hi, this is Zena Harris.
And I'm Mark Rabin.
Welcome to the tie-in.
Good morning, Zena.
Hi, Mark.
We're back in the saddle here in
Back
our home turfs.
back at home. Yes, back at home. Um,
Yeah,
Happy to
you
be in
made
my
it.
little space.
Yeah, yeah. You made it down to you're at the EMAs as we talked about last week.
hmm
Did not make it unscathed in
No,
terms of
I
the
mean,
flu.
yeah, caught a bug, caught a bug. I hope nobody else there. I talked to a few people in my follow-ups and they all seem okay. But somehow I caught something, which is a bit of a bummer. So sorry about the sort of voice
But but I
issue.
think I think when you're out and about so much, like traveling and shaking hands and talking to people and, probably like in the last few months, right, we've probably come across like thousands of people or
Oh,
think
totally.
about,
And you,
you know,
you've done like this whole road trip and everything. You've seemed to
yeah,
come out pretty healthy. So,
I think I just got lucky, I
hmm
don't know. It's just, a- avoid the folks that are like visibly sick. I don't know.
Well, yeah, like I wasn't walking up
Pump
to people
fists.
who are like, actively like coughing. So, but anyway, you pick it up somewhere. So who knows?
Yeah. Yeah,
Um,
you never know. But
mhm.
I think what's starting to trend a little bit is you showed up at the EMAs with a very flamboyant jacket.
Well, I wouldn't call it flamboyant, but yeah, it took me by surprise that folks were so interested in my jacket. It I'll find a photo here, but like I am
Yeah,
never the one that has like the
right,
cool outfit. Like never, never. I try, whatever. I'll get some interesting like top or something. I usually shop secondhand, so shout out to
right.
secondhand
Yeah,
shoppers and stores and everybody keep that up because that's cool. I hear it's a
yep.
growing
I
trend,
do
but
the
I've
same.
I've been
Oh,
doing
it's
it forever.
me too. It's
Um,
never off trend.
no, but for some reason, like this particular jacket that I wore was like everybody came up and complimented me, which is like so unusual for me and my wardrobe. So,
Maybe you
um,
can describe it.
yeah, I'm trying to figure out how to share my screen here real quick. But okay, here we go. And so it's just this lovely blue and with
Oh yeah,
flowers. Isn't that
there we
cool?
go. Yeah, yeah. I love it.
Yeah, yeah. Well,
It's
anyway,
almost like yeah, it's like royalty almost or some sort of like
yeah, yeah.
it's got
Anyway,
a presence. The
it
the
does.
jacket's got a vibe.
And it's bright and it's cool and it's secondhand. And anyway, love that.
Yeah.
So
It's gonna make the top of the social columns and the who's who of at the EMAs.
yeah, that would be weird because that's so not me
Yeah.
ever. Anyway, so that was a little fun to have that kind of different different angle on the event for that day. And then I was
You'll
like,
have to
it's
get it
pretty.
sorted for the Canadian Academy Awards.
Oh no, coming up, I gotta find another cool jacket. Anyway, yeah, we'll
That's
see.
that's fun.
We'll see. Yeah, but some travel coming up, going later
Yeah.
this month to Toronto to the
Hmm.
Canadian Screen Awards,
Okay,
and
three words.
and so that's fun. And we'll see some folks I know, and see how they do it there. So excited about
Yeah,
that one. I'll fill you guys
that's great.
in once I go.
Yeah, that would be great. And
hmm
on the spot, yeah, see the who's who of that. I mean, I don't even know that there was not a prominent award ceremony here like that here.
Yeah, every year around this time, the end of May, it's like Canadian Screen Week, and then they have
Hmm.
awards and whatnot. So I've been to kind of side events around it, but I haven't been to this larger award ceremony. So we'll see how it is.
I mean, this will be interesting too because, Canada's got, went through a bit of a nationalist resurgence here over the last many months and really trying to figure out how to engage more with our sort of lateral provincial cousins versus going south all the time. So
Mm,
I think that's going to be an interesting moment for Canada. So I'm sure that'll be part of on the tip of people's tongues as well, right? Sort of how do we support Canadian production, Canadian media, Canadians in general.
mm-hmm. Mm-hmm. Yeah, we'll see. We'll see what the talk of the town is.
Yeah.
There. Always
Mhm.
always good to keep up. So I will report back for sure.
Yeah.
For sure. And
That
you've
that's
got some
great.
stuff going on too coming up,
Yeah, I mean,
right?
I'm going to be in Toronto next week
Oh, okay.
for yeah, actually a friend and mentor and advisor of mine, um, Yasmin Glanville is retiring from RSI, Rethinking Sustainability Initiatives. She's not
Mm.
retiring in general, but she's been with the organization for I think 14, 15 years, and so we're going for her big dinner on
Oh,
next week and just some meetings and always checking out what's going on in the Big Smoke. Toronto's got, I mean, it's such a huge city and it's got its own energy field, and so I'm looking forward to that. And then I'm just sort of bouncing around out here in BC for a while, and I'm actually taking an improv class. In the amount of time that I'm here, I'm taking like a improv two. So I already took improv one,
okay.
and it's just so awkward and beautiful and amazing. It was actually a friend of mine. She was like, Mark, let's take this class, and then I was like, okay, great. I signed up, and then she didn't end up signing up,
So
and
you're
then
there.
so
Do you know anyone else?
no, it's like just like, well, I mean, the one woman I knew, like sort of know her from my previous class 2 years ago,
Oh, okay.
but otherwise it's just like a bunch of randoms who are just into improv or want to learn more and kind of move up the ranks in improv. There's two shows, right? Like it's a 5 week thing. There's two shows. Anyways, it's just I was just sitting there last week in our first class going like, oh man, this is so ridiculous.
Oh my gosh. Well, are they going to record the shows?
No,
Oh,
hopefully,
because
hopefully not.
I would love to see that, and then maybe we could play it.
No way. It's
You don't
like,
think so?
for the show that we did in the first like 2 years ago and I did level one, I didn't invite anybody. I didn't even like I think I like invited my mom and she was like, no. And then uh and then I didn't invite anybody else. I was just like, I don't know, it's so weird. It doesn't come naturally to me. Like I can improv and I play music and drums and I can a lot of improv and music stuff, but it's like this is why I'm taking this class, right? Because it's like
Yeah.
this is like to get that movement of not get stuck in my head,
Yeah.
because you're kind of like you can't make up something and then all of a sudden the scene changes or something happens and you got to be present,
Right.
right?
Yeah.
And like this is a big part of the last year, a couple years of just my own stuff is really working on my own presence and presence with myself, but also not like running ahead, in
Mm-hmm.
terms of like a lot of people when they're in conversation, their brains are already going into the next question. They're just waiting to like say their own thoughts or their own question. And it's like we all do that, but
Mm-hmm.
that's something that, we really have to try to work hard at to not just jump the gun all the time and be like, but actually work on listening, right? Listening skills, and then
Mm-hmm.
pausing and then offering something as a result of what they said.
Yeah. Yeah.
So,
That's a real skill. Like I totally hear you
mhm.
on that jumping ahead piece and like, you know, trying to listen. I mean, definitely a work in progress for myself. But but that's really cool that you're putting yourself out there like that and taking this class and trying to build that muscle.
Yeah, it's definitely scary though, but it's good. I'll get through it. And I'll, if I have even if I solidify a couple of key skills right from this thing, and that's all I get from it, then it's great. There's also like a pass fail like because you if you want to go to like level three, it's kind of it's Blind Tiger, this sort of improv comedy school here. So it's kind of funny, like in the class that he was like, well, I may ask you to take the class again if it's not, and I was like, oh man. Anyway, there,
Keep it.
there, that's that.
That's that. Okay. And what else is going on?
Oh man. Well, I think,
Um,
the other thing that's going on, I mean, as I think we alluded to last week, the kind of festival season is
yeah.
is in play here, and I've got a deep connection with the off-grid music and arts and festival scene because, that's actually where I started Portable Electric, right? Doing
Hmm.
renewable energy, powering events and festivals. And Burning Man has been a big part of that, as you all know. And yeah, so there's Otherworld, which is a regional Burning Man event that's happening on Vancouver Island.
Hmm.
And I'm bringing some solar generators for the camp that I'm with, Stardust Saloon. Shout out to Stardust Saloon. That was the camp I went to Burning Man last year with. It's just a small crew, like 20, 25 people. But it's fun because I get to flex full solar, powering the music and the camp and everything like that. It's the perfect size. So this is fun. It's just like festival season
Yeah.
kicks off here, and there's a festival every weekend, or so you can go out to the forest and
Find something.
have a great old time. Uh, but yeah, for me, it's more focused on a couple of key events, including Friends Club, which is the one that I helped produce June 26th to 30th. So yeah, so that's kind of where we're at, and then yeah, and then you and I are just booking out as
Oh,
well, like for the
yeah.
next 3 months. And yeah, it's just wild, like summertime, it's like just things get even busier. And then
Hmm.
you still have the job, the day job, right? And so on.
Oh,
So it's like,
yeah. Yeah, lots going on. Lots going on the day job. Green Spark Group is humming, coming up with new stuff all the time. Working just uh so just shout out to the team. Good quality work, always learning, right? As things
hmm
evolve. I mean, because that's the world we're in. The nature of production and the nature of our industry is that you never know what's going to come up. You never know, the sort of creative element that's going to come up or a new kind of angle from a company that they'll want to explore. So, constantly paying attention and adapting and,
hmm
providing good service, I think is what helps the industry evolve too, right? You need
totally.
all these players, right? So,
Yeah. And then using AI to accelerate, like the team and so on. Like I've been thinking a lot about, like this, I come across so many people now, and everybody's definitely using AI to like accelerate their own ability to work. It's like an extension. I try to experiment with it as well, like here and there, and just like, why not? It's like having an advisor. It's like it's just there to help guide certain things.
totally, totally. I think, we've talked about this before. I really do think of it as a tool to get things done,
hmm
certain things done faster, but it doesn't necessarily, it doesn't replace creativity and the sort of human ingenuity and emotional component of all of this work. But yeah, good tool for
Yep.
sure. So,
Yeah. It's, it would be cool to get somebody on here really, because I know there's been a bit of like a, sort of backlash against AI, but, you know, I just saw something, I don't know if it's true or not, but like Ben Affleck pitched a full AI generated
mhm.
movie or something like that recently. Like it'd be cool to get some actual AI folks on the podcast as well,
Hmm.
to get their take on it because it's the stuff they're making is ridiculous.
Yeah. Yeah. I think interesting evolution here in the creative industry space, with regard to AI and, immersion, all of these components of the creative experience. I
Yeah.
mean, yeah, we should dive into more of that just to learn. Anyway,
Yep.
good to see you.
Yeah, you too.
Good to check in and hope you all enjoy this upcoming episode. And please do like and subscribe and share with a friend. That's what this
Yeah.
is for. This is for getting, the stories and cool information about what's going on behind the scenes out so that it, helps inspire confidence, helps you do your work, helps you learn something out there. So do share with a friend, and we'll see you all soon. Hello, everyone, and welcome back to the Tie-In. Today, we're talking with Dr. Kishla Askins, a national security and health security expert with 30 years in public health, emergency preparedness, and disaster management. As COO of Polar Pangea, she develops global Arctic solutions. A commissioner on Alexandria's Environmental Policy Commission, she advances climate resilience. She is a retired military officer and former VA Deputy Assistant Secretary and has shaped national policy through governance and expertise. Her doctoral research examines biosecurity risks from thawing permafrost. She has expertise in science, diplomacy, biosecurity, crisis response, and she is a leading voice on health, security, and policy in addressing global threats. Dr. Askins, it's a real treat having you on the podcast. Welcome.
Welcome. I just want to say I will actually finish my defense in early summer. So,
Okay.
doctor is not the official title yet.
Oh, it's coming. It's
Yeah.
coming. Okay. All right. Well, yay, we're ahead of the game here.
Yes. Yes.
Okay.
It's been
Well,
a long journey through many wonderful opportunities and experiences. But I think that's what's great about life. It shapes us.
yeah. Yeah. Well, let's I know, we had a chance to do a prep conversation, and oh my gosh, like during that I wish we had been recording because it was just such a wonderful conversation. But I wondered if you could take us just through a bit of your work experience, how and kind of where, you're talking about biosecurity threats and policy and all of these elements. And I'm just curious, like, if you could walk us through a little bit and where climate change fits into all of this.
Yeah, no, thanks. So in the military, I am and was my training is as an emergency medicine physician assistant, and so healthcare clinician for so many years, and had the opportunity to serve the nation at many corners of the world, and so you get to see the various landscapes
Mhm.
in combat, at sea, ashore, in humanitarian assistance, in large medical centers, in the Pentagon, where our nation's national security is developed, drafted, and executed. And then also, I think my time in the United States Senate working for Senator Joe Donnelly really shaped how policy can impact millions. And so
Mhm.
going from, one patient at a time and seeing how the environment is impacting and exacerbating disease processes, um, and then also how it was affecting operations and our ability to respond. So when I retired out of the Pentagon, I wanted to start bringing people together to start talking about these stovepipe issues. And so I did that until working for the Biden-Harris administration, where what did I do? I brought data, policy, and governance together to make
Mhm.
us a more integrated and efficient federal agency. And I kind of want to foot stomp, integrated, because I think that at this time it's so important to underscore that federal agencies do not work in a vacuum.
Mhm.
So many mission sets that they do together. For example, the fourth mission a disaster response type. During COVID, the Department of Veteran Affairs played a critical role in that response and working with DoD and the White House and HHS. And so, again, that integration across a whole of government response is so important to understand.
Mm-hmm.
And so, how did I get to biosecurity risks of thawing permafrost? Well, in order to answer that research question, you have to understand policy because I'm doing it through a policy lens. You have to understand health security and kind of the transmission process of how pathogens and organisms move. You have to understand the response network on how do we deal with this in the situation where a novel pathogen becomes unlocked by thawing permafrost. And then, finally, what keeps me up at night is that, a novel pathogen does get unlocked and a state or non-state actor, gets a hold of that novel pathogen and uses it as a bioterrorist weapon. And so, seeing that climate change of how it's affecting just operations in general, my national security lens started looking at the Arctic to understand that this is the new frontier. There's a race for resources. Climate change is warming, and so the northern sea route is becoming, more open, which causes globalization, and we know what's happening there. There's a piece that, indigenous people, are having to move and lose their homes. And so I think this doctorate is sort of a convening of all of my capabilities uh, in a very succinct way.
Wow. Like I have so many questions just about what you've just described. Um, and it's so neat to see how this education process or this doctorate, all this research is bringing all of those together as well. And it seems unique and relevant for what we're doing right now. So, a lot of times we talk about solving problems and whatnot. It seems like you're right in there, figuring out, some of the most pressing. Um, so I want to say hello to Mark, who just joined us. Welcome.
Hello. Thank you so much. Sorry about being late. I was stuck in a car driving somewhere, and then I'm here in a sort of a makeshift studio that I'm in. So, hi, Kishla. Nice to see you again.
Do Mark.
Hopefully, you
Um,
can hear me all right. I have my traveling microphones here.
yeah,
Yeah.
yeah, we can. We can. I wanted to, if we could, I mean, double click on this word integrated that you mentioned because I feel like it is something that is easy to say and very hard to do. And I would love to hear your perspective on how you and others go about doing that in this work.
Yeah. So it's not easy. Let's just
Yeah.
start there. I think I think about is, C4, not C4 in the national security sense, but C4 in, culture, communications, cooperation, and collaboration. I think culture, first and foremost, you have to want to do it, right? You
Mm,
have to want to do it. Change causes a lot of anxiety in people, right? And I think
yeah.
right now, people are feeling a lot of anxiety because of that chaotic uncertainty that I sort of am describing our current day at. And so the question is, how do you reduce that chaos, that uncertainty, and how do you improve and open up that culture so that people can see why transformation and integration is so very important. And
Mhm.
there then is the next step of communication. Communicate often, communicate maybe more than you would normally communicate, and
Mhm.
communicate clearly your vision, the steps to get to that vision, the individual roles that they play in that vision. Because if people feel as they belong to that vision, they're more likely to have buy-in, and then they have pride in what they're doing. And then I often use collaboration and cooperation because sometimes, collaboration is an active and cooperation is sort of passive, and you need them both.
Mhm.
Because even if you disagree, there's a sense of, okay, we're going to do this, we're going to get to yes. But in that journey of getting to yes, we're going to be honest and candid about, what are the second and third order effects on this journey. So
Mhm.
I think that's really important now more than ever. And when I say integrated, I'll also add in there multiple generations, right? Because you have the young generation that takes on information very differently than maybe the other extreme. And so you have to understand the different cultures, the different ages, the different experiences, so that your communication is clear to all of those audiences.
Mhm. Mhm. I feel like you just described the physical production process of making a TV show or a movie. I mean, seriously, like this is what I love about kind of stepping outside of our direct industry and hearing from thought leaders in other industries, because the way you just described and approach your work is very relevant for how, we do in entertainment as well. It just translates differently in, different contexts, but that it I love how succinctly you just put that, because it's like, many, many conversations roll around these topics. And I really appreciate that answer.
Yeah,
So,
I think also, life brings a sense of humility to your life.
hmm
And so also, you know, I'm in my fifth decade. So I've had a lot of missteps, and I call them their wins or you learn. Um, and so you have to approach life like that.
hmm
Those missteps can be valuable if you take the time and reflect on those, so that the next time you can again integrate what you've learned from a previous experience and then introduce it into the next time uh, use this pathway.
Loved our chat when we did a little preamble chat as well. One thing we touch on a lot about is also um, how we're struggling to communicate some of these more complex topics in a way that's manageable and bite-sizable. When you speak, you've got a very clear vision. It's very clear, but the messaging is not cascading down and it's not being broadcast out. And one of the angles that we look at in entertainment is always, to use the voice of the entertainer or to get that message out. Just wondering what your thoughts were on that, and how polarizing some of these sort of two sides, let's call it, are both coming at it from different angles, and some would say successful and not successful in different ways.
Yeah, I think you have to, and maybe it's my early days of teaching that taught me to understand your audience. There obviously are issues that are political and there are issues that are not political, but really it gets down to service. And if you understand that you are a servant leader, it's important to understand um, your audience, and really that human element of the audience. Um, Being able to distill complex ideas down to the common denominator. And I say that with a lot of respect, in that when I say common denominator, I mean, how does people take on information? What words are important to them or not? What experiences have led them to that organization or cooperation or that work project? And so again, the center is people, and we've lost grasp of that. We really have. And, yes, there are extremes, geographically speaking, but most people are in the center. And yes, they have some uh, issue specific that lean to the right or to the left. But in my mind, I think the best thing we can do is approach this as a servant leader or a citizen or an advocate for citizens, an advocate for our nation, and not a particular side. And I think if we do that and be super sensitive to the language that we use, then I think, again, the message may be received by the audience much better than it currently is.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
Yeah, and you mentioned something around, building bridges. That was something that you had mentioned. I was wondering if you could talk a little bit about that, because that's something that we think a lot about. And if the bridges aren't there, then how do we create those bridges?
Yeah, so I love advocates at all levels. If you're talking about a corporation or an organization, having those, advocates, at all levels of management and work, super important because they are your eyes and ears. And so you build those bridges. So that's within a discipline.
Mm-hmm.
If you're looking outside of the discipline, then you have to be very intentional about how and what you seek to do. And so if your purpose is X, Y, and Z, you need to look within and see, do I have that expertise? Do I have that communication strategy? Do I have those lines of effort currently established? If I don't, then, maybe if I work in the music industry and I want to make a music video, my music can only go so far. I need television, I need video, film. I may need a little bit of communication in there, maybe a creative artist. So there are different capabilities that I would think you would want to establish early so that you can work together. And we always say train to fight and fight to train to fight and fight as you train. And what that means really is that before a crisis happens or before the project happens, that team has run through, all aspects of what you're willing or needing to accomplish.
Yeah, and part of that I think is setting, establishing culture. That's your first C in your C4, right? And I would imagine that setting the tone and, I guess through leadership, in whatever group and whatever you're trying to tackle, um, that's a that's like foundational is understanding, kind of they're setting the culture for how this is going to roll.
Yeah, and I think, just another point to your question, Mark, is, and I'm glad you said that, Zena, because we talk about culture, but how do you establish that in a multidisciplinary, you know,
Hmm.
uh, project? And so last time we talked about kind of the hub and spoke. In medicine and healthcare, the hub is the large medical center with the very specific, highly skilled capabilities, subspecialties like pediatric surgeon or a pediatric oncologist. You would have that at the hub, and then the spokes are other facilities that are smaller, but we're able to take care of the patient in a holistic manner because we have that hub and spoke sort of organizational design. That's number one. So we can treat the whole patient between the different facilities. Two, this is an opportunity also for the different healthcare clinicians to go back and forth so they maintain skill sustainment, they communicate with different specialties, and so they learn about different disciplines and best practices. And so that makes them a more well-rounded clinician. The same thing could hold true in the film, TV, and music industry, in that that hub would be also an area of innovation, an area, the central nucleus for maybe planning. And once that planning occurs, then we talk about execution. They can go out and execute, individually, or, then do that maybe one-off execution where it's just two satellites, and it doesn't need all of the satellites. So that's part of that culture change, Zena. But I think the organizational design also facilitates that.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm. So how how does organizational design and your C4 culture, communication, collaboration, and cooperation, can we put that into the context of your work with biosecurity and novel pathogens and whatnot in the Arctic? Like how does this all come together?
Yes, that's such a great question, and the timing could not be more relevant.
Great.
The United States has always been the global leader on the world stage. And the Arctic has been, if you look across the, different administrations, party aside, there's been the common denominator of environmental stewardship. That's so very important. So now that we see that the climate change is accelerating, and I call the Arctic ground zero because that's sort of our thermostat. And as that permafrost thaws, then, that 3 to 4 times the amount of greenhouse gases, and then the even more incredible methane, accelerates that climate change. And so as we see that, as I referenced earlier, the Northern Sea Route will open up. And so that's globalization, bringing things in and out. And so, how does the C4 all work? Well, the Arctic Council is the governance per se for the Arctic. And so, you have permanent members, you have observer states, and then the 8 Arctic nations. And so geopolitics really is at the forefront because of, Russia's invasion of Ukraine. And at that time, they had the chair of the Arctic Council. And since their invasion, they've pretty much left the Arctic Council, and also the Arctic Council uh, sort of, I wouldn't say relieve them of their duties, but the cooperation and collaboration and communication, um, we're not there. And so immediately you have to recognize, to your question, we have a key nation outside of the Arctic Council. And that means we don't have all of the data that we need to make informed decisions about the Arctic. If you think about permafrost and Russia, Canada, and the United States has the largest percentage of permafrost, and Russia has 53% of the coast of the Arctic Ocean. So I'm trying to say that it makes it very difficult, not having the data from Russia.
So they need to be at the table. And in some way, can we use the Arctic as a platform for global consensus and working together in a slightly more depoliticized way? Is that even possible?
Mark, you could not have asked a better question. So I've been doing some work in science diplomacy, hoping that science creates a bridge of communication and data exchange so we can move forward to having a full picture of the Arctic, which means we have a better picture of the planet. Um, is that possible? Invading the sovereignty of a nation is not right.
Mhm.
Okay, so we can all agree to that. And that makes it very difficult. Now they're in talks that may change, but there are people who are working, including me, on science diplomacy in the Arctic to try to improve the collaboration, the cooperation, the communication moving forward, because it is vital, not just in the Arctic, but sharing data across agencies, across specialties, across capabilities is also vital in our own country.
Yeah, it's interesting. I was part of a peer review committee that was looking at the Canadian ecosystem and the technology in our national labs. And one thing that came up a lot was in working with remote northern and indigenous communities as testing grounds for new technologies to work with, the innovators and universities and companies, but also to work with communities to get microgrids that are good for the Arctic, or water systems or food systems. And so we can also use that. I mean, we don't doesn't come up that much in the conversations we're having currently about the Arctic because of the obviously the Northern Passage and the sort of militarization of the North. But there are a lot of opportunities to collaborate and work with communities to get off-grid technologies to market and to then proliferate around the globe. So I don't know if that's counts in the science diplomacy there, but there's definitely opportunities to leverage, yeah, the ecosystem up there to develop new technologies.
Yeah, and actually, and you guys probably heard this during my panel, but I am advocating for DIME, diplomacy, information intelligence, military, and economic as, national elements of power to add science and make dimes, because both as an assessment and a national element of power, because science is very powerful, whether you're talking about technology and innovation, or you're talking about nuclear capabilities, or biowarfare, or speaking about the indigenous population. This is so very important because traditional knowledge and indigenous knowledge needs to marry to address the needs of not just the people, but the region. And so, um, going back on that culture piece, Zena, I think this is where we really, really need to engage more with the indigenous populations. And there are protocols out there to engage with indigenous people in a respectful way, bring them to the table. And also, when research is done or projects are done, follow through and go back to those communities and let them be part of the team, not just decision makers, but also understanding the outcomes of what we find and how we may be able to make things better. But I would also say we need to be careful. Anything we introduce into the environment could change the entire ecosystem, as we're seeing, just in Alaska with salmon, with the climate change, the caribou that's migrating. So I'm very sensitive to the entire ecosystem and how that kind of One Health model works, um, as far as the biosecurity aspect of my research.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm. And I'm curious, I feel like people receive information or want or certain they have certain motivators that drive them. And one of the things that comes up for us is, obviously messaging, and certain messaging works better than others. But the element of risk comes up because there are all sorts of implications associated with it. And that seems to get people's attention when talking about risk factors. And I'm curious how you see that conversation when we're talking about risk, maybe through, biosecurity risk or various diplomacy, risk type conversations. How does that word or that, I guess, the messaging around risk influence how you talk to people or influence how people are motivated? Or is there another way?
No, so in crisis, we talk about the crisis risk communication kind of playbook. Be the first to, communicate, clarity, all of those C's. You want to make sure that you're communicating often, communicating with clarity, communicating to the right audiences, and that's in a crisis, you know. Bad information never gets better when we sleep. It just gets worse. So that's why we say communicate often. Communicating, day-to-day issues. I'll just go back to saying, understanding your audience. You know, some people have a 10 to 15-second attention span. Some people want you to write a dissertation. It's just some people love visual depiction. Like I love people who can visualize data. I think it's a powerful tool. And so getting to risk, right? When I think of risk is what is the risk? Who's carrying the risk? And for how long? Those are the things that you have to communicate to decision makers. And decision makers then can say, okay, you're saying there's a 70% risk that this will happen. How do I mitigate 50% of that risk? And so then you communicate to the audience or the people carrying the risk, hey, when we started this, there was about 70% risk that we assessed. We were able to mitigate down to 20%. If this happens, here's our plan. When people understand that they're taking on risk, when you take choice away, that's when they no longer feel like they're part of the team.
Yeah, absolutely. And I keeps coming back to me around insurance companies are going to be the ones that are actually driving our climate response.
Mhm.
Right. And maybe not so much in the Arctic, but everywhere. We see coastal nations, wildfires, hurricanes, tornadoes, everything. It's like it feels like the insurance companies are in the driver's seat, and once they sort of deem this area no longer habitable or no longer insurable, and the state says they're not going to insure, so what happens? I mean, I think that to me is kind of a ominous and scary, but also kind of oddly hopeful thought pattern that I have. Someone's got to make some decisions some point and drive change.
I couldn't agree more, but I go back to why I always say people first.
Mhm.
Why are people burden or shouldering the cost?
Yeah.
What about the people that are making the environment worse?
Yeah.
They, shouldering any of that cost? Probably not. I don't know that answer. But I think, shared responsibility, the science is clear. When you had 24 separate $1 billion natural disasters and it keeps, trending up, that doesn't
Mhm.
mean that that's going to change. I always say, if we're using the same tactics and the same strategy, why are we thinking there's a different outcome?
That's right.
Yeah.
So, I mean, come on, people. So, does that mean, everyone that's contributing to the degradation of the environment, they get to continue to do what they are doing, and the outcome is predictable? What is not predictable is where homeowners will no longer be able to insure their homes. And then I'll add another piece that I've been working on is I'm surprised the healthcare industry, and I'm not promoting this, but I want people to be aware, something I'm thinking of is will healthcare insurance costs be determined by geography and the exacerbation of disease? I'll give you a situation. So if I have asthma, and I live in California, and it's a high prevalence of wildfires. I can probably say that I'm probably going to have at least a couple exacerbations of my asthma. And I'm going to go into an
Mhm.
asthmatic attack. Should my, and will industry then raise that insurance premium based on where I live? Just
Mm-hmm.
homeowners insurance. And so, on the alternative is I live in a place where I don't know where this would be that's safe from a natural disaster or less likely to cause an exacerbation of my asthma as a patient, then
Mm-hmm.
my premium goes down because I'm going to have less exacerbations or asthmatic attacks. So I'm watching that closely because I don't see that far behind.
Yeah. Yeah, it just makes me think about how all of this is connected. Like this is a big systems issue. And I heard in your session and we talked to other folks who's like, what happens in the Arctic doesn't stay in the Arctic, and you mentioned, globalization, folks coming in, folks coming out. Then we've got, other fallouts from that, not only from a climate change perspective, but health perspective, and then talking about insurance on top of that. It's all just this sort of compounding systems problem that we have to try and solve. And one of the things that humans created this, right? Like so we have the ability to change it, but it all kind of goes back to the foundational elements that you talked about early in this conversation, like the four C's. Um, and 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 cooperation in and around all of that to kind of solve various elements of the systems problem.
Yeah, I mean if people aren't convinced, all we have to do is go back during COVID and look at some of the highest polluters who, smog just, hung in the
Hmm.
skies. And during COVID, they dissipated, right? And so
Yeah.
you saw that and you're like, wow. Yeah, that's a great example of human caused climate change.
Yeah.
You know, and so with that, I completely agree. Humans in themselves are, a system.
Hmm.
But then you take the system of the environment and get
Hmm.
to that one health kind of ecosystem and understanding kind of plant, animal, and people. And the Arctic is a perfect region for this because, we are introducing, that with globalization, not only are you bringing things in, but you're taking things out, whether that is pathogens, organisms, who knows what. You think about from the animal life coming in and leaving, birds that migrate
Hmm.
north and then they migrate south. That's globalization as well. And then we're starting to see, different plant life that's shifting and transmitting and having that are, you know, making changes due to the environment. And so you're absolutely right, Zena, stepping back and kind of looking at it holistically through the multiple systems will be a better solution than looking at something in sort of a vacuum or a tunnel.
Hmm. Hmm.
So, I mean, in terms of complex systems, what comes to my mind is really the thought of AI helping us
Mhm.
understand these complex systems and find new solutions that we maybe haven't really thought about or haven't had the breakthrough yet. Is that coming up in your work? Are people talking about leveraging AI to really help humanity get to that next stage, or at least understanding these complex systems that you're working within?
Yeah, no, that's a great question. I'm an early adopter of technology. I fall into that category. So, and by no means am I a AI expert. But I think, it's a good tool to augment what you're doing, your thoughts and your critical thinking. I think of AI as sort of, if you had 10 people around the table giving you different ideas, and they're talking to each other, that's sort of what AI can do in a, millisecond.
Yeah.
But I think one of the things I would like to talk about is the lack of surveillance in the Arctic.
Yeah.
Um, you talk about wastewater and you talk about air quality, and there's some that's being done, with satellites, but the cooperation, collaboration, and the culture to ensure that data is standardized so we all understand what the norm is and what is outside of that norm, and using AI to better understand those trends, I think could be very beneficial going forward, and not letting, biasing the outcome of my research or telling you the tagline. That is a common sentiment, is that we don't have enough surveillance in the region. And I absolutely believe technology, AI, and research and development can get us there.
And by sort of like data, and you're talking about like remote monitoring stations that are monitoring whatever ice flow or temperatures or different pathogens you're saying, or that's what you mean, and just generally researchers on the ground as well. So it's kind of a combination, and then all of that data then can be aggregated using AI or some other technology for a non-biased, fully integrated way. Is that?
Yeah, I'm an advocate for a central data repository. Again, but you have to, just as you guys know, you have to make sure that that data is clean and
Yeah.
standardized in order for the output to make a lot of sense. And it needs to be raw data so people can critically analyze that in parallel to the AI. Again, using it as a tool, among other tools. But I think it could help also with communication, understanding, the different regions, the different cultures, what collaborations currently exist, what, based on the data, is recommended additional collaborations, and how that actually works. And then potential strategies to get to that, outcome or intent of, regional cooperation, collaboration, because, we want to keep that region peaceful and stable.
Yeah. So it's like, it feels like it's a new frontier really for science and for work collaboration. Almost like space, or the moon or so on, but this is on our own planet. Like
Mhm.
that's one thing that always gets me. Just we're out there so captivated with, right, space, which fine, it's a good place to learn, but like we barely know anything about the Arctic. You're right.
Yeah, I mean, and again, you think about the indigenous populations, there's 4 million people-ish that live in the Arctic, and 400,000 of them are indigenous people. So, and among that, many different tribes and cultures and languages. And so we have a lot to learn, not just about them, but their knowledge of the region. Way back when I was a young sailor, I worked in aerospace physiology, talking about space. And it was very like cutting edge, a medical translator. And these people would travel all over the world to gain these languages so that you could, as operators, as like military personnel, we could go to, if I went to a region that didn't speak any English, I could take this medical translator with me, and it would give me, I would be able to speak to those patients that I was taking care of. And so you think about that, how many years ago, 30 years ago? And now, what is in the future? We talk about AI. Is there something more than AI out there that we can build that's ethically, morally right to do and that we don't lose control of? But I think it could be very, very helpful to understand history, understand the International Space Station, how we cooperated, and what the protocols are for that, as well as the Antarctica Research Treaty. I think there's things to gain from that as well. So I think if we look at and again, I recognize the geopolitical tensions in the Arctic,
Mhm.
but the United States, speaking on my own personal position, needs to um, want to cooperate more, unify, collaborate, because isolationism never works.
Yeah. Yeah. I feel like those are words and actions we need to start demonstrating a little bit more than we have been recently. Um, yes, yes. It's just this is all so very fascinating and just I'm curious. We ask everyone this, and I'm curious to hear your perspective. We're interested in creating a new playbook, a new, playbook of guiding principles, if you will, about um, sustainability and entertainment. And, from your perspective, I'm curious, what guiding principle might you offer for this playbook?
C4.
C4. Yeah,
C4.
I love it. So simple and so clear.
And
Yeah,
it's so good.
I
yeah,
know. It's just
This is
like,
this is what we're missing
I
in
know.
reduce, reuse, recycle, and
I
then
mean,
what?
it is swirling in
C4.
that. And I'm like, there are other people doing amazing things in the world in other industries. What can we learn?
yeah,
So that's
yeah.
amazing.
Yeah, and I think that culture piece gets at what you're saying. What can we learn? Well, and that's culture. Like,
Yeah.
I want to serve this population or this organization. I need to understand the culture of it. I mean, think about uh, you apply for a job at an organization. I think, especially with the younger generation, culture is so much more important than quality of life, culture, flexibility on how they work. All of those things are so much more important than, say, somebody in their fifth decade. We would work 12, 14, 16 hours a day. You guys get it. It was just like work hard, play hard, you'll be successful.
Yeah.
Yeah. So, understanding that culture and then communication. And again, it goes across generations. Even I'll say it goes across experiences, political affiliations, geographic spectrums. I mean, we just have to seek to understand people.
Mm-hmm.
What motivates them? What
Mm-hmm.
doesn't motivate them? What brought them to, this project or this, organization? Um, and then be willing to not just collaborate, but to cooperate.
Yeah.
Um, get to yes, work to get to yes.
Yeah.
Yeah, or that classic business school term, co-opetition, even, right? I mean, it's great. Like we can collaborate in a competitive environment because it'll make us better. Like
Mm-hmm.
it's not a zero-sum game, which I think it feels like a lot of stuff is going to zero sum here. Um, but yeah, it's I love it. I love the C4. That's my new.
I know.
That's,
I'm taking that. I'm taking that with me. That's great.
Talking about competition, so one of my favorite presidents, Abraham Lincoln. Have you read the book Team of Rivals?
No.
no.
Okay, so Doris Kearns is a phenomenal presidential historian, and Abe Lincoln is one of her people. And so Team of Rivals is about how Abe Lincoln didn't bring cabinet members that affiliated with him, same party, but he
Mm,
brought the people who maybe disagreed with him, maybe was with a different political party. And the whole point of that is he surrounded himself with different ideas, different experiences, and that challenged him when he was making a decision. And
mhm,
that is quintessential servant leadership, understanding where your weaknesses are, where your blind spots are, and then bringing the best, the brightest. And it doesn't mean that you're going to be their friend. What it means is you're going to serve the people right.
mhm,
And so it goes back to that competition, Mark. They were competitors. And then once Abe Lincoln was elected, they became teammates because of him.
mhm, mhm. Yes, the idea of a team and working towards something, and even if you have different ideas, it's just, yeah, it's fundamental to moving groups forward, right?
I think this is why
Um,
we should play on, people should play on team sports. Should be forced to play team sports
I
at some
know,
point in their lives.
just
Maybe even
or
as a grown-up, right? Because we don't play team sports anymore as grown-ups really that
yeah, we kind
much.
of lose that if we're not, if you're not
Yeah.
like a professional or whatever, and
Yeah.
it's or have a gym membership or whatever allows you to get into that thing. Like, like we
But it
don't
has to
just
be a
have
team,
this. Yeah. So
you
you
know.
have to seek
think
it out.
I think it forces you to work with different types of people.
Hmm.
And that's where I think I've been so fortunate. And I think service members in general would say this. You work with every corner of our nation, every social economic level,
Hmm.
you're going to work with them. And so it gets down to you have to understand people. You might on your team have somebody who was homeless, but finished high school and then they came into the military. You may have somebody who went to Harvard, went to Ivy or prep schools and then went to Harvard and then came into the military and
Hmm.
everything in between, or somebody who became a citizen to join the military, like everything. And then all of the geographical challenges and barriers, if there are any. So I think that was probably one of the lessons that I am most grateful for
Hmm.
is that focus always on people and
Yeah.
then use
Yeah.
to be successful.
Hmm. Hmm. Such a good
I
lesson.
love it.
Such a good lesson. Gosh, thank you very much for this conversation.
Oh, thank you. It's been great talking to you. And I hope hopefully it was helpful.
I,
Yeah. And
yeah.
and hopefully our listeners too, we've been kind of taking twists and turns over the last little while, a little bit, diverging from our sort of sustainability and entertainment, but it all still comes back down to the same four principles, same thing, people, the C4.
Yeah. The C4. Yeah. I mean, I think this is, for me, I mean, I teach a lot. I've developed curriculum. Like we're talking about strategies. We're talking about these things in organizations. And this all jives. And I
Mm.
really, really appreciate your perspective because it's so helpful to hear. So thank you.
No, thank you for the opportunity.
Our designer is Aaliyah Kane. Music is by Peter Chapman. Our producer is Colin Miller.